Video request from Gypsy Household. This is a few days ago. Video request. What do you think about Karl Marx's analysis of capitalism? His basic premise was that capitalists would do anything in order to maximize profits, and this included buying every resource and squeezing worker wages. Workers would become less rewarded for their efforts as competition from rival companies would result in pressure on profitability. With pressure on profitability, the capitalist bosses would decide to cut wages, benefits, and make people work longer hours to compensate for a loss of earnings due to increased competition. Eventually, concentration of wealth would lead to capitalist demise, as most people can't afford basic essentials. Do you agree capitalism is unstable and results in concentration of wealth by its very nature? Will capitalism be replaced by socialism? Thanks. Wow, interesting video request. What do I think of Karl Marx's analysis of capitalism? When they gave me this request like 2 or 3 days ago, I started listening to the Karl Marx books. I listened to the Communist Manifesto, and you can listen to it on YouTube. I'm shocked by how many audiobooks there are on YouTube. YouTube's becoming a huge... I mean, if it's a big audiobook, it's probably on YouTube. It's pretty awesome. Like the Gaelic Wars is on YouTube, you can listen to. But I already have all that stuff on my MP3, so I can just listen to it on my computer. But the Communist Manifesto is fascinating. I recommend anybody listening to it. It's very intelligent, but it's not, confusing. He talks about socialism, basically, and the rise of socialism after the fall of the French kingdom. Karl Marx, I didn't look and see when he lived, but I think he died in like 1880 or something. So he lived in the 1800s. He's German. He was Prussian. So he witnessed the whole Industrial Revolution. Germany became a country unified in 1870, and they had their big industrial revolution around that time, around the time Karl Marx was alive. And it happened after England. England had their first industrial revolution when they invented all the stuff, and then Germany kind of perfected it, and then became the most advanced country in the world. Karl Marx was talking about all of the different types of socialism, and that socialism was originated in France, and then the Germans kind of got the idea about it and wrote about their own kind of socialism. And so according to Karl Marx, and you'd have to listen to this book, the Communist Manifesto, a bunch of times, or read it and pay attention to it, because you have to actually try to pay attention to it if you're going to get anything out of it, because it's intelligent. And I'm working on my timeline. I'm not really paying attention to it, but from what I got, French, the poor people in France were more in more dire conditions than they were in Germany, with the words that they use. Proletariat means the poor people. Bourgeoisie means the rich business class. Here, let me back up a little bit, because in the time that Karl Marx was alive, they were undergoing a lot of changes. And it was actually illustrated pretty well in the television show Downton Abbey. And that's about, royalty. Like in Europe, you have these royal families. They're called the landed classes, the class of families who actually have titles bequeathed on them, which means that they just own a lot of land. And so they own the land that all of the peasants are on, and they make their money off of that. So from rent. The peasants have to rent the land, and this has been going on since the beginning of the Dark Ages, where you had knights and kings and so those landed classes, the people with all the land, would be kind of like a petty king sort of. He'd own the land, and all the people on it would pay him the dues, and then he would use that money to, I guess, build an infrastructure for him and to provide protection for him from, I guess, the other duke down the way. But it ended up, so you would have the working class and the non-working class, and so the people would just could just hang out in their big houses and not do anything, just sit around and be way more wealthy than all the people working. And that went up all the way up until the Industrial Revolution, because that's what the economy was based on. It was based off of farming, that's where all the money came from the land. But then the Industrial Revolution came, and people could invest in machines and businesses and stuff, and make their own businesses and make money that way. And with farming, you could farm a lot more efficiently, and it ended up bringing the poor uneducated classes kind of more up to the level of the landed classes, and then people could make money on new industries, like banking, starting in like the 1500s, was a new industry, and all kinds of factory stuff, and so that created a new middle class and then quickly became a new upper class, which was kind of replacing the landed classes, and then the people with the land started. As people would move into the cities to work at the factories, they'd move out of the land, and the landed classes would make a lot less money, and that's why in Downton Abbey they had to lose their abbey, because they just weren't making the money anymore. And but you can see how they had all the workers, and they were just fabulously wealthy. So it got really, really, really bad like that in France. That was where it was really the worst. And then that's why they had their French Revolution. And it was never quite that bad in Germany. And it's interesting if you look back in the past, because even in the days, in the Celtic times, like in BC, the French were a lot more agricultural, and had big cities with kings, and German was more just tribes hunting and gathering and stuff. And so fast forward, Germany in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the people France was more agriculture, and there were more peasants. In Germany, it was more people were just more independent minded. The Kingdom of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire, it was more less centralized, and so the Germans had a different idea about all of that than the French. They were less. It was less dire, less as much of a difference between the bourgeoisie, this new rich class, who now didn't even really have to be a working class. They were just like the owners, of the business, and then they could just make money off the workers. And so I guess they interpreted it, all of the different socialism and new social laws that we should make more in terms of idealism and just natural law the way it should be, instead of a reactionary and us versus them. So anyways, that's just what the Communist Manifesto is what I got from the Communist Manifesto. But Karl Marx was kind of taking a second look, questioning all of the old European ideas of like property. Like Karl Marx wrote a book called The Capital, Das Kapital, and it's a really huge book. Oh my God, it's gigantic. And I'm like a third of the way through it, listening to it, and I'm not really absorbing much at all, but he's just analyzing all the different kinds of money that there are, and how people can just put a price on money and say what it's worth, and analyzing what exactly stuff is worth. And Karl Marx his basic premise was that work is something. The value of something is like people's time, and that people are all basically created equal. And if you put a certain amount of time into something, then you deserve a cut from that. More, like he's just kind of trying to fight against slavery, serfdom, where people could just didn't own anything. He like the people who own the land, they own everything on the land. So I think Karl Marx. I saw a YouTube video. Karl Marx got his ideas and motivation to study all this stuff is because people were gathering firewood on their lord's land, because everywhere was owned by somebody. You'd have one lord who'd own land, and it would butt up against some other lord's land. So nothing was just like a natural park or anything. So, but people always gathered firewood. But now people are getting busted for gathering firewood because it was on somebody's land, and then they would have to like pay for it. And maybe that was the landed class trying to figure out a way to keep themselves rich. But he's saying that he was just trying to say that the workers, their time is worth more than just like their worth. The time they put in is like worth something. It's not just they can't let themselves be taken advantage of by all these rich people. And anyways, that's basically Das, what he was all about. So his analysis of capitalism. His basic premise was that capitalists would do anything in order to maximize profits, and this would included buying every resource and squeezing worker wages. Workers would become less rewarded for their efforts, as competition from rival companies would result in pressure on profitability. And with the pressure, they would cut. Yeah, sorry, I didn't need to read all that. So the competition between the bourgeoisie would then make them want to maximize profits. And then that would end up causing like a revolution with the workers, because, it would kind of cause it all to shut down, because then the workers would get poorer and poorer, and they wouldn't have any money to buy anything. So then the businesses wouldn't make any money. Interesting idea. Karl Marx lived in the 1800s, which was an era more where there was finite resources. It was before we really started gobbling, and we still do have finite resources. And I guess so that's what his idea relates to the modern day, in terms of like modern day consumerism, where the more we focus on GDP and making money off of goods, the quicker we're going to use up all the resources and pollute the planet, and just have a crash where we all suffer. It's kind of like the 21st century version of what he's saying, where it's sort of similar to what he's saying, where the rich would get richer and richer and richer, and the poor would get poorer until they couldn't buy anything from the rich, because there's just no resources. And I think it's an interesting concept. I think when people start envisioning the future, like from here on into the future, you should realize that we can get out of it, and we will get out of it, because human beings in the end are smart people, and when we all realize together what needs to be done, we do it, when we all realized that we needed to, go to World War II, we did it, when it becomes enough of a reality in people's minds, it's just like second nature. It's just like a scientific reality. You follow the law and you don't speed down the road or whatever, crash the car. That kind of just black and white reality. And I think pretty soon we're going to come to that kind of reality, that realization that money isn't everything, and responsibility is everything, and following the law is everything. We create laws. We've always created laws and follow laws, and so all we have to do is follow them. Create the right laws and then follow them, and not break them or like bend them, or hide under them or something like that. So the question was, is capitalism the future, or is socialism the future? Yeah, well, let's analyze what capitalism is. Capitalism is where people get to just do whatever they want to make money, and so if you offer a product for a certain price, you're welcome to offer it for whatever price you want, and if somebody wants to buy it, for your price, they can, and if somebody else wants to sell it for less, then they'll just buy it from them, and it's just this like organic, no holds barred, just all go, just pure freedom and the way people can make money. But I think, and then you have like capitalism, like corrupted capitalism, which is fascism. That's what I call fascism. I call it fascism because the word. In Italy, the word fascist means that all the sticks tied together, so it's kind of like a conglomeration, because when the sticks are together, they're really strong. So it's like a conglomeration of all of the big businesses getting together and making deals with themselves so that they can maximize their profit off of everybody else, and basically, not and then create laws that would benefit them, and so it's not fair to the common person, because they're making their own laws that just help them and not the common person, and getting away with stuff. And that's the kind of world that we're going in now with America, fascism, where the big businesses control the government, and so that's not capitalism. So I think capitalism is the way of the future, because it'll always be the way of the future, because it allows people to just do what they want, but within the bounded by law. Fascism is capitalism that's not bounded by law, by real law. So yeah, if you make laws that allow collective bargaining, so that people don't all move to a town to work for one guy, and then he decides to pay everybody less, and they can't do anything about it because it's the only industry in the whole town, But if they can collectively bargain, then they can shut him down too, and then they can take over his factory and have somebody use it responsibly. Those kinds of laws, union laws that have like a minimum wage laws, regulations for the companies, and all this kind of stuff. So capitalism bounded by laws, I think it's possible, because in the future people won't be tempted to break those laws and just look after themselves, because we're getting to a point where you don't. I think there was a study a couple of years ago. If you make $50,000 or more, it doesn't really change your happiness level, and I think it's even less than that. Once you learn how to live right, you could live off of $12,000 a year and be just fine. I mean, you can just, because most money wasted is on like food and stuff, eating out or whatever, and you can live on like $70 a month for food if you just eat canned food. And there's even like soup kitchens and places, charity places that give away food. So food's not really that much of a problem. Even somebody who works part-time minimum wage would have enough money for food and then some. And then rent, if you just get, just a simple place, you can get by on rent. And you could still have enough extra time to have fun and do whatever you want and educate yourself and become smart enough to, make a lot of money. But so, I don't think there's this whole scarcity of resources and this kind of like desperation going on. So once people are just realize that it's all good and people are happy enough, then once people make a certain amount of money, they're not going to be like addicted to make more. Like whenever you have a new technology, people get addicted to it. Like that movie Gods Must Be Crazy, where the bottle fell out of the sky and everybody's fighting over the bottle because it's this new technology. Well, I think money is kind of like that. Money is kind of like, the ability to buy all of these things like cars and houses and land and flying around all the time. It's kind of a new phenomenon, and so that people aren't used to really having. So when they do come across money, they just freak out and they just get addicted to it, like a smoker would get addicted to cigarettes or something. But I think in the future, it's not really going to be like that. People are going to chill out and they're going to realize that life is about being fair to other people and just having the spare time to do stuff that doesn't cost that much money. Like, anybody can go biking or running, or stay fit and educate yourself and hang out. You don't have to have a lot of money. And travel will cost less once we just, invent, like, say, renewable resource airplanes, battery-powered airplanes and stuff. And the cost of stuff just goes down and down and down. And once it goes down enough where anybody can, travel around and we make the wealth more level, more even, then money doesn't really play a part. And you don't have to have, it's not this animal that goes out of control, like what Karl Marx was saying, where people just, because companies don't have to maximize profit. Every company can make enough. And if there's a new industry that's needed, you would just get into that new industry and you would do it. And if your company is hurting because there's too much competition, then yeah, you would just get out of that business and get into something else. There's nothing wrong with shutting a company down because it's run its course. People do that all the time. People don't have to get desperate and start like cutting corners and everything in order to keep their own company afloat. Yeah, so that won't happen. I think maybe Karl Marx came up with that idea just as kind of one of the ideas. I don't remember it being his main premise of capitalism. It was just an idea he had, but he was saying this like in the 1800s, where people were just beginning to have wealth and all these resources, and so it was just kind of one of these like possibilities. People hadn't come to the idea that there actually can be enough for everybody, enough quality. I think in the past, when people rebelled against their lords and stuff, like the French Revolution, it was because it got really bad, like people were literally starving to death and stuff, So when it gets so bad that you don't care if you live or die, and then that's when when everybody gets like that, that's when you make the collective agreement. All right, well, we might as well fight, it's like fight or flight, we're either going to die or we're going to fight. So then that's when they have revolutions and rebellions and everything. And we've had a lot of revolutions and rebellions in the past. So in the past, there were people, it was bad. There was one class of people who were so loaded that they could travel all over and make these giant castles and import all kinds of cool stuff and have like 100 nice outfits that took somebody, days and days and days to build, and just huge wealth discrepancy. And at the same time, there's all these people starving to death. So that's kind of the world that early industrialists and bourgeoisie type of greedy people were coming out of. If you look at history, there's always there's always like a period of time where people are really like there's a reactionary time of like a generation, where people are basically rebelling to what they come out of, and they still like emotionally feel it, they're still connected to it, and they feel the reality of it, and they're trying to fight back. And in the time of the early industrial revolution, I think they all kind of were familiar with starvation and extreme poverty and people taking advantage of people. So they kind of carried that momentum into the Industrial Revolution, and that's why they were making like little 5-year-old kids work 16 hours a day in mines. In a city in what was it? One of those, Manchester or something. The life expectancy was like 25 years old because people would just get worked to death, and it would get polluted and like accidents, and it just got really bad. So that's when they started making the child labor laws and the overtime pay and overtime laws and laws are what make, and regulation is what makes the world work within of the framework of capitalism. So, but so I think capitalism is the way of the future, because people will just be able to, just on a small scale, open up their own business and do what they want. That's capitalism. Now, so the person said, well, is capitalism or socialism the future? Socialism is where you have a lot of safety nets for the people. Socialism is also the way of the future. Like right now we have capitalism, fascism, socialism, but in the future we'll have capitalism, socialism. Socialism, where, like, as time goes on, we'll get more and more and more and more social, and it'll all be completely socialism. That's the way of the future. Like if you go way in the future, because we're as time goes on, we're going to slowly become more and more, government's going to get more and more involved in everything. For example, the banks. Right now, banks are all privately owned, and then they can, because it's privately owned, the people just want to make as much money as they can with their bank, and then they take over politics, and then they get to rise the interest rates on credit cards up to 28% and make loans, give out loans to people who can't pay them back, and if they can't pay them back, the government will pay them anyway. When they make really steep loans to those people who can't pay them back, because then they get to make extra money out of it, and then when they can't pay it, then the government will pay what they were going to pay. So it's just a scam. And Iceland crashed, had their big economic collapse, and so they rebelled and they nationalized all their banks, and now Iceland is the fastest growing economy again. They're kicking ass because so if we nationalized our banks and nationalized stuff that everybody uses, like health insurance, that kind of stuff, like schools, nationalize that. It provides a safety net for everybody and makes it more of a level playing field for everybody. It makes it less, because when something's nationalized, it follows laws, it's controlled by elected officials. It's, like capitalism is kind of like kingdoms, and socialism is kind of like a democratic republic. And if you look at history, countries always evolve from kingdoms to republics. A republic is a higher form of government than an autocratic system where one benevolent dictator gets to make all the rules and tell everybody exactly how it's going to be. It works great if that guy's good, but every once in a while you'll have a guy who's good like that, and then power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and people like the guy, the biggest autocrat from Europe, Louis XIV, in the late 1600s. He destroyed France. He killed everybody fighting all these wars. He made it so centralized that France just crumbled 100 years later, and they had the French Revolution. He died like extremely in debt, and so that's kind of what like fascism is, extreme capitalism, where people can create the rich can just create their own laws and then take the money out of the taxpayer money from, no more, not as many public schools for the kids, and then they put all their kids in private schools, and then you don't want to separate the classes. You want to, that's like going back into feudalism, and it causes eventual rebellions and wars and misery for everybody. You want to have as much of a level playing field as possible, and that would be socialism, but not communism. Karl Marx Karl Marx had a lot of negative things to say about communism. When I say socialism, I mean like elected officials. The people who were in charge of the banks would get elected in, and the more educated the people get, the more able they're going to be to manage all of that. Once a certain number of people become literate, the country turns into a republic. That happens throughout the whole world. I don't know what the percentage is, but somebody figured it out. Literacy is directly related to how the government functions. So once people become literate in terms of what laws we need to have, and the history and why things are the way they are, and people are getting really literate really quickly because the information is on the internet, and people are learning how to find out stuff for themselves and not just be spoon-fed information. The TV people are all like, just about to retire. They're like 75 years old, and all the internet people are the young people. Young people watch internet all the time, never even turn on the TV. So fast forward to 20 or 30 years, people are going to be really smart, be able to find information all for themselves. So then people will be able to manage. So they'll know who to vote for. So we can vote in, the boss of the national bank. We can vote in the officials of the National Trust for the Social Security and unemployment benefits and the health care, nationalized health care. What Obama's doing now with nationalized health care is exactly what we need to be doing. I know people like to bitch and moan that, oh no, but yeah, sure, I guess the idea is good, but he's doing it wrong. Just read it. Well, learn it, and explain it, because I've never had anybody explain why exactly Obamacare is bad. Yeah, when you're making a huge leap from one system to the next, it's just hard. It's kind of like, imagine how hard it would be if all of a sudden we were going to get rid of the IRS and get all of our tax money from sales taxes, and then make all these new laws that would keep the rich from getting too rich. That would be, getting rid of the IRS would make Obamacare look like peanuts. And I think we do need to get rid of the IRS mainly because it's just a waste of time. It's too much work trying to figure out all this stuff, all this income tax stuff. Either get rid of the IRS or just make the income tax code a lot simpler. But maybe we could start by doing that. But yeah. So that's why Obamacare is just rough. But the more we nationalize stuff, the more control that the actual people have over it, because they can then control the people who control the system, rather than the people who control the system are just owners of their own business, kings of their own kingdoms, that then get so rich that they can then pay politicians to make rules for them. We waste so much energy, so much. We spin our wheels so much. If the big businesses are really controlling politicians, why don't we just have the big businesses directly control the government? Then we don't have to have politicians. Then we'll save all that money on all of the ads for all the political elections, and we won't have to spend. You don't have to waste money on the lobbyists, and they'll just be our benevolent dictators. If they're going to do that. But no, but that wouldn't work. So it's better to just make it as democratic as possible and make it. We need to get money out of politics, and like me, I should be able to run. And if nobody votes for me, then that's the people's fault. And then the people can't, because so many people these days are, they're trying to destroy the world. Those Illuminati, they're pitting us against each other. They. It's like, people feel totally disempowered, and so people need to feel empowered again and take the power back by allowing anybody to just run. You have to have a shitload of money if you're going to run for office, and it shouldn't be like that. And so I think it's baby steps that we need to take. First, get money out of politics, get good politicians in there, and find some kind of balance between capitalism and socialism. I think stuff that everybody uses and everybody benefits from, that should be the socialist stuff. So banks, healthcare, and education should all be controlled by the government. Now all that superfluous stuff, cars, houses, all the things, food, all the things that people have should all be managed by companies and should be straight up capitalist, that are beholden to regulations. But I mean, in the future, I think there's going to be a big leap of consciousness where people generally just won't be. They'll feel there's enough, and they'll just follow the rules because they just know that you have to. That's the best way to be. I mean, people already do that anyway. When you go into a store, people pay. I mean, not a whole lot, not a big chunk of the population are career criminals. And people could get free food anyways, and they don't. Right here in the town I live, I could go into this place called Sister Carmen 2 times a month, every 2 weeks, and each time I go in, I can get 65 pounds of food, all the different fruit, sweets, everything, and it's way more than I need. Like, I went in there twice, and I got 65 pounds of food the first time, and I'm like still eating it. It was enough food for like 3 months. So we've got we already do have a pretty, in America, at least where I'm at, system where people could get free food, but do they? No, they don't. They buy the food at the supermarket because they feel like users and losers if they do that. People could get on food stamps, but they don't. So, so your common person isn't greedy and trying to destroy the world. It's just these super rich people who are addicted to money like it's crack. Who fuck everything up. But so in the future, once it becomes more common knowledge that the cool person isn't the rich guy, because a lot of times right now the cool person is the rich guy. When you watch a movie on TV, the movies are always about some rich dude who made it big in business and made rich, or somebody's talking about their friend. They're always bragging about their friend who made a lot of money doing this or do that. It doesn't even matter like what they do, And especially when you see super rich people in houses, like people, it's kind of like rude to ask them what they do, and because all that matters is how much I have, not what I do. Like me, I don't have much money or kids or a house or anything, and a lot of people think I'm a loser because I'm working on a timeline all day long. But I mean, in my mind, I'm the coolest guy ever because I'm working on a timeline, because that's the coolest thing ever for people. But people just, that's not what people value in the world these days. So. And I'm talking about like normal, like poor people, I'm not talking about super rich person. I'm sure a lot of super rich people would be like, douchebag faggot, make timeline. But stupid people, I mean, poor people do that too. So once poor people put their values right, and everybody, it's all a collective thing, then we really are going to need less and less regulation to force us to follow the rules anyway. So yeah, it's interesting to postulate the future, But yeah, in the end, I think we'll have a future of just socialism, because socialism is just basically a machine that we all set up to just like scientifically formulate it to just manage everything, that the infrastructure that we live in, to take care of everybody, you know? And that's what we'll have in the future. If you go into like 1,000 years in the future, everything will be so ironed out and controlled by just, you know, not by the son of the last guy, but by the guy who just wins the election, or you know, who everybody says is the right guy to do it. And that's socialism. Socialism of the future will be elected officials controlling government-owned industry of everything, which is different from communism. You know, communism, you'd have the Communist Party, which controls everything, and so if you're outside of the party, you're useless. You're powerless. So socialism would be you know, there's no party, there's no central party, there's just people. Every human being is your own party. And so that's also another thing in the future. We need to get rid of parties. Parties come up because as units of people who have their own like ideologies and differences, but as everybody becomes more similar to each other and more individual, the need for parties goes away. You know, parties would just be like, oh yeah, I'm 30% libertarian and 15% Democrat, you know, just comparing to what just general types of ideologies there are. But, you know, in 100 years, parties are going to be gone. In 100 years, people are going to be so damn smart that it'll just be, you know, Jimmy Dugan and versus Belinda Jackson, you know, and that's it. And then you could describe them sort of in those different ideologies, but they'll even be using different words than the ones today. So, yeah. So future, I would say, is socialism. Socialism is the future. Okay, peace out.